On Friday night, October 27, 2023, 3 weeks after Israel started carpet bombing Gaza following the October 7th attack, 400 mostly pro-Palestinian Jewish activists gathered inside Grand Central Station in New York City. The demonstrators, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, were arrested trying to shut down the station. Only a few politicians were courageous enough to join the protesters in standing up for the Palestinian cause so soon after October 7th. One of them was Zohran Mamdani, a young assembly member from Queens who, from the earliest start of the Gaza genocide, has continued to call for a ceasefire. Mamdani had long been one of the few vocal critics of Israel within the New York State Assembly, having sponsored legislation to stop charities from funding illegal Israeli settlers in the West Bank. And he has long been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, having co-founded the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter back when he was a college student. Today, following the June 24th primary, Zohran Mamdani, who was once scoffed at by the political elite as just a fringe figure, may have just done the impossible. While we do not have the final results yet, he is on track to be declared the winner of the New York City Democratic primary for mayor. The significance of this cannot be overstated. It means that a 33-year-old, a practicing Muslim, a Ugandan-born immigrant of Indian descent, and a proud member of the Democratic Socialists of America will likely be the next mayor of the most racially diverse city in the world with over 8 million people. All this on top of the fact that Mamdani may have just pulled off one of the most impressive electoral upsets in modern electoral history, possibly defeating his closest rival, three-time Governor Andrew Cuomo. Zohran Mamdani ran a stellar campaign. He had a simple, catchy slogan that resonated with voters: "A New York we can afford." His populist platform included freezing the rent for the city's 1 million rent-stabilized apartments. He pledged anti-poverty measures such as free bus services, free childcare, and the opening of city-owned grocery stores that would be more affordable in each borough. He also vowed to construct 200,000 new affordable housing units and raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour by 2030. And Zohran had an army of volunteers to spread his message, over tens of thousands, knocking on over 1 million doors. The pundits in the mainstream press and the mass media will be scratching their heads trying to come up with explanations as to how and why an unknown 33-year-old outsider could defeat a 3-term governor, who at one point during the peak of the COVID pandemic in 2020 was the most popular politician in the country. And weeks from now, as the final results of the primary come in, there will be more voter data to analyze through to pinpoint the other key reasons why so many New Yorkers voted for Zohran. For this episode, and in anticipation of Mamdani eventually winning, I interviewed 2 guests who understand New York City electoral politics on the ground better than anyone. One is returning guest, award-winning journalist Ross Barkan, whose book on Andrew Cuomo has recently been reissued, and the other is Shawna Morlock, a Democratic district leader in Queens who was heavily involved in the Zohran campaign. I recorded these interviews weeks before the election, but even then both Barkan and Morlock had strong feelings that Zohran could pull it off. I asked Shawna why she became an early supporter of Zohran, way back when he entered the race and was polling at a discouraging 1 to 2%. She explained it had to do, largely, with his reputation as an activist politician. As an assembly member, Zohran frequently participated in various protests, whether engaging in a hunger strike for debt relief for striking taxi drivers, or confronting border czar Tom Holman after immigration authorities detained Columbia University graduate student Mahmoud Khalil. Zohran has often showed up in the front lines of numerous progressive battles, earning him considerable street cred within the activist left. Shawna specifically cited Zohran's hunger strike for taxi drivers in 2021 as one of her reasons for support for mayor.
Like the way that he went to bat for like the taxi drivers who were, really like having like a crisis of like suicides. Like one of them had, lit himself on fire, like on City Hall steps. Like the way that Zohran immediately was like, no, this community deeply needs help, and like they're being left out in the cold because of corporate interest, right? Like, Uber and Lyft had come in and like devalued the medallions, and these people were just sitting, like being left out. And like the way that Zohran went on that 2-week hunger strike, like showed me as, a person who supported him that like I made the right decision. That hunger strike helped, along with Taxi Workers Alliance, like all of their organizing to like bring debt relief to, these taxi drivers that desperately needed it, And he's done this over and over with other issues. It's not just about legislation. It's about like the things that you do, even when you don't get personal credit for it. And the way that he helps to move other people's bills as well. Like it's just been, it's been very gratifying to like see that he is a person who cares and it's not all about him as an individual. Like he really just wants people to get help.
Ross Barkan is a close friend of Zohran Mamdani. When Barkan himself ran for state senate back in 2018, Mamdani managed his campaign. When I spoke to Barkan in May, it was already a big shock in the media that Zohran was polling second behind Cuomo.
Like Zohran has a message. Zohran, the left didn't choose Zohran. Zohran was a guy who decided in October of 2024 he was going to run for mayor. No one had ever heard of him outside of the people in his assembly district and like me, because like I'm his friend. And then he shot up because he's good and he had a message. He's exciting, right? And that's great. I mean, he's the most successful. We talk a lot and you do videos about like socialist politicians. I mean, Zohran's going to be entering the history books already, in that New York has never had an avowed socialist like be the runner-up in a mayoral race. I mean, we'll see like where he shakes out on primary day, but even so, it's like a socialist candidate who is viable. Like that's like never happened. Not since Vito Marcantonio ran for mayor, or so we're talking like well over a half century ago. So like that's a big deal. And in a weird way, Zohran has done so well. The expectations have shifted so much that now you have conservatives being like, ha ha, another failure of the left when Zohran doesn't win. I'm like, it's a 33-year-old assemblyman, like, literally like maxed out in fundraising. I mean, that's insane, right? That doesn't happen ever.
But perhaps even more surprising than a socialist potentially winning the mayoralty of New York City is that this particular socialist is also a pro-Palestinian Muslim. Perhaps no issue differentiated the two leading candidates in this race as sharply as their diametrical stances on Gaza. Cuomo brought to this race his staunch support for Israel. When he was still in state office, he signed an executive order banning New York State from doing any business with a company that boycotts Israel. One of the first things he did after he resigned as governor was to found a group called Progressives for Israel. More recently, Cuomo demonstrated his pro-Israel commitment by joining Benjamin Netanyahu's legal dream team. Headed by Alan Dershowitz, this group is prepared to defend the Israeli prime minister against charges of war crimes brought by the International Criminal Court. As Barkan pointed out, Cuomo was in fact running hawkishly to the right, even more so than in the past.
And and look, there's an earnestness too. I mean, Cuomo's running on a really a somewhat reactionary platform. Talking about how the city is descending into chaos and talking about, anti-Semitism which is really code for crush the pro-Palestine left. And I'm Jewish, and so that's how I view it. He's running in a way is more of a conservative than he did like in his final term as governor, and really trying to blame the progressives for everything and anything.
While Cuomo's staunch support for Israel adheres to traditional, conventional political expedients, polling since 2023 has shown a dramatic shift within the party, with more Democratic voters now expressing sympathy to Palestinians than to Israelis for the first time ever. In any previous election year, the failure to express support for Israel would have been a massive liability. Zohran's campaign represents one of the first to channel this new increase in support for the Palestinian cause. Shawna noted the significance of this development.
I do remember like very, very early, like I feel like it was more of especially because we were knocking like in rent stabilized places in Astoria. I very viscerally remember, like a couple of like people, like even through the door being like, I'm sick, I don't want to answer the door. And so I'm walking away and they're like, actually, what's his stance on Israel, Palestine? And, I'm just kind of like bracing myself and I'm like, oh, he believes in Palestinian liberation. And they're like, good, that's all I need to know, like in a positive way. And so in Astoria, I think that like, he's a very good representative of the voters here. Like there's a reason that he's a leader here. I've for sure had people, that have like I've seen people that have like not supported him because of his stance on Israel-Palestine. Like that's, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that that would happen. We have definitely had volunteers that have, and field leads, people that have gone not just from like knocking on doors, but also to like, organizing those canvases because of Zohran's Israel-Palestine stance. It's been largely really positive.
Meanwhile, for Cuomo, the old pro-Israeli playbook didn't work. For many liberal New Yorkers, whose main issue is stopping Trump, Cuomo essentially pledging to crack down on pro-Palestinian demonstrators was a sign that he would be a puppet of the White House. Cuomo couldn't be seen as the best candidate to oppose Trump, when he would be essentially doing his bidding.
I mean, it's going to be a very interesting playbook, especially with Trump in the White House attacking the civil liberties and the rights of pro-Palestine activists, right? And if Cuomo really is standing by and saying nothing, doing nothing, he will suffer politically for it. I mean, that's just a fact. It's very polarized by generation. And I think in the long run, the Israel hawks are going to lose in the Democratic Party quite a bit. I think it's going to be unsustainable in the next 10 to 20 years in the left of center American political party to have a very pro-Israel wing. I think that will just shift to the Republicans. That's just going to move out. But I also just think a lot of younger voters, the under 30 crowd especially, is not supportive of Israel. And you see that in polling. And you see, like, in terms of sympathy for Palestinians, it goes up the younger you go.
But even if pro-Palestinian sentiment is spreading among the Democratic Party base, it still takes the right candidate with the right organization to prevail against the current pro-Israeli political establishment and media. Because before Zohran entered the race for mayor, there wasn't really a strong organized opposition to Cuomo. It is not as if Zohran had not run, some other center-left candidate would have inevitably been able to defeat Cuomo in its place. In fact, as Barkan pointed out, many of the traditional left-wing organizations that used to have a hold in New York politics have lost significant influence, power, and relevance, and they were not at all prepared for the Cuomo threat.
I call the alphabet left, like the NGO left, the professional class left, the working families party. I mean, they've really fallen off. I mean, the professional class left is just moribund in New York City, at least when it comes to having political potency. You look at, DSA left, socialist left, doing great, like Zohran to the moon, right? But where the NGO professional class left is just like lost. I mean, I was writing months ago, Cuomo can be stopped if the Working Families Party fundraises for like a PAC, does a massive expenditure, raises a few $1 million, and spends against Cuomo. And nothing, like they can't do it. I mean, that's it's May now, and you realize they can't build the opposition. The opposition isn't there. I mean, the opposition is candidates criticizing Cuomo in press conferences. That's what the opposition looks like. So that professional class left really, really has to do a lot of soul searching, and it's not something they ever do, because they just think things are great and they astroturf everything. And I've been criticizing them for years, so they probably just like write me off at this point.
And this is where Zohran was the right man in the right place for the left. His identity as a strong member of an alternative organization like the Democratic Socialists of America enabled Zohran to fill the vacuum created by the professional class left. Zohran wouldn't even have run if not for the backing of the DSA. While there'll be debates about whether or not Democratic voters in New York City are socialists now that they are poised to elect one as mayor, one thing is certain: the Democratic Socialists of America provides a blueprint for building and empowering other left-wing organizations across the country. Other groups could utilize DSA's model as a fluid democratic organization that allows members to take active roles in various electoral and non-electoral activist campaigns. as opposed to other left-wing nonprofit groups who receive money from wealthy donors. The DSA funds itself through membership dues. This means it is composed of people who feel genuinely invested in the organization. The DSA also provides communal support, not offered from other Democratic clubs or progressive organizations.
We have made this organization something that's like inclusive to normal people. Like I help to, support and in coalition with like other amazing members, like a DSA parents group. We've got like Comrades with Kids. There's a running club. There's like foodies. There's a choir. We're trying to make this organization not only a place for people to get involved in things that matter to them, like housing or environmental issues or tenant, whatever electoral, like whatever the thing is that like moves you politically makes sense, but it's also a home for people to like have family, because New York City has a lot of immigrants and, I guess immigrants as well, like people that are moving in from different states. And you want to have a place for people to find folks that are like aligned with them and like to really have community, because our like traditional, institutions that would have supported that, like, religious institutions or like other kind of community groups, like they've kind of lost support, or, like they're just like not as salient, I feel like, in a lot of people's everyday lives, and a lot of communal things tend to be online, and like we're trying to like get people outside, and so it's like it's been really like wonderful as an adult, like a full-fledged adult. I'm 44, to like be making like hundreds of new I don't know if you're friends with hundreds of people, but like I deeply respect and like love organizing alongside these people. And I've got like dozens of people that like I actually make time for and like have connections with, because DSA provides that space and that connection. And like, you just know that you have similar values, and it's a really good base to build relationships off of.
It could be argued that it is more the communal component of the Democratic Socialists of America, rather than the socialist ideology itself, that propelled Zohran's campaign. The implications of this idea are important. One can have the right candidates and the right issues, but to build a robust grassroots campaign like Zohran's in other places across the country, there must be a democratic organization that offers moral support and a sense of community to its members. There needs to be an incentive to build community to attract people to continue fighting for causes that initially seem unwinnable. This is how Zohran was able to recruit so many volunteers right from the beginning of the campaign. So while we wait for the final results of the election, what can we learn immediately from Zohran's campaign? When Andrew Cuomo was running in this election, he said the problem of the Democratic Party since Kamala Harris's defeat was that the party has supposedly gone too left. Other prominent Democrats like former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel and California Governor Gavin Newsom have been making rounds in the media echoing the same sentiment. Zohran Mamdani's campaign refutes all of this in spectacular fashion. The party needs to be pro-Palestinian. The base wants socialism. Bread and butter left-wing economically populist issues get voters excited. But in the meantime, a campaign like this can only happen in a place like New York City, not until other membership organizations like DSA spring across America.